You were listening to the Never Meet Your Heroes podcast, conversations with artists about their work and inspiration. I am your host, Anthony Moses Sanchez. Welcome to another episode of Never Meet Your Heroes podcast. On today's episode, we have Ashley Bartlett. Go ahead and say to everybody, we're on FaceTime.
How's it going, everyone?
And you are in beautiful Sacramento, California, the capital of California. As of 2017, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, thanks to Trump.
Yeah, probably the ocean's going to take it over, but we've got some time.
Yeah, it's going to be beachfront soon or under the water.
Looking forward to it.
So we'll start with having you introduce yourself. You're a writer of lesbian fiction. Is that the best way to put it?
Yeah, lesfic. It takes less time to say.
Oh, lesfic.
But
I love it.
Yeah. And lesfic is very weird. We're removed in a lot of ways from queer literature because we pump out like romance novels at an astronomical rate, but we pump out really good romance novels at an astronomical rate. So I feel like that makes up for it.
Okay. I mean, I feel like I can jump in on this idea too because I've read a lot of lesbian pulp fiction when I was at UCLA. So yeah, there was a great period in history where men, of course, they think they know about lesbians, so there was a lot of that first, right? And then
they
lesbian.
didn't know about lesbians.
Yeah, I don't know about lesbians either. You'll have to help the audience that needs to properly be educated if they. So what inspired you to get into writing?
Well, I always read as a kid. That was my escape for everything. And I hated to write. I hated to sit still and do anything except for read. And when I read, I don't see words on the page. I see pictures. I fully go into it. I'll respond to questions when I'm reading, but I won't actually know what's going on around me. So that was most of my childhood. And then as I grew up, I discovered poetry like we all do in high school. And then I realized somewhere around my junior year that if gay fiction existed, then lesbian fiction would exist. It was quite the moment. So, of course, I went on Amazon, which was new at that time. They just had books. And I did 1,000 searches. And my mom was great. Like, if I put books in her cart, she would just order them.
Nice.
No questions asked. So I had a huge collection as a young kid. And then my publisher launched the year I graduated high school. And I knew that they were going to be my publisher. I knew that I was going to write lesfic. And then I did it. So now I'm 30 and I have no more goals. Life's going well.
You know what? I'm 39 and I have no more goals. That's why I decided to start a podcast. I'm like, maybe I can find what I lost over the last 10 years if I start talking to people that I've, interacted with. I know what you mean.
Well, let me know if you find it.
To get personal, my goal was to go to college and to live in LA, and I did it.
Good job.
I mean, I had other goals, but those were the two hardest things that seemed impossible for me. If anyone ever knows about my childhood, so.
And full disclosure, you and I went to college together.
Yes.
Which I did completely by accident, moving to LA and going to college. It was just I graduated high school and I was working as a barista and I was like, well, shit, I guess I have to go to college now. And then I was good at it, so I got into UCLA. But it was all completely by accident. Yeah. I just showed up at class and talked, which you know me, I like to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely one of Professor Little, which is one of our queer lit professors, one of his favorites.
Mother Little.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of people trying to get into UCLA. When we got into school, that's when the Regency started changing how people can have access to the school now. It's probably really impossible, or it's becoming more impossible.
Insanely expensive at this point.
Expensive. Yeah.
Because they raised tuition 2 or 3 times while we were there.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's at now.
Yeah, if I didn't have so many books to read, I would have went to a few protests, but it was hard because you were I still have to read this whole literary theory book these Shakespeare
And
plays.
6 novels.
6 novels, I know.
Tonight.
In a quarter system.
And then write a paper about all of them.
Yes, but not confuse any of the subject matter. I'm sure they all bled together all the time.
Yeah.
So you got to UCLA. Now, I was like one of those non-traditional. That's a nice way of saying he got to school when he was in his 30s. So you have like the normal track path where you went to high school and you went straight to UCLA. I always find this fascinating. Kind of.
I took like a year and then I went to community college for 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. So by the time I got to UCLA, I was old. Not as old as you, but old. So like we could drink at that point. Oh. I met my wife when I was 17, so we already lived together. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were an old married couple.
Oh, yeah, I know.
You know this.
Yes. I've noticed that there is this weird, when you're married or when you're a gay couple that's married, gay, lesbian, whatever, you have this weird kindred spirit that others like you accept that, oh, well, you're just going to be home all weekend with your significant other, and that's okay. You don't have to go to the clubs.
Yeah.
You know,
and I hate people. I truly hate people. So like going out is horrific for me.
It is.
I'd much rather be here talking to you on a podcast.
Yay. Hello, podcast listeners, which is typically my mom and my friend Angel, who was on the second
Mom. Now my mom will listen too, and then they can be friends.
Aww, yay. So, tell us a little bit about your childhood. You kind of mentioned a little bit earlier to me before we started recording about, your life at Stanford or your early...
Yeah, I was born in the Bay Area, but I was raised in a little suburban town above Sacramento. But I was born in '86, so height of the AIDS crisis, in Stanford Hospital. My mom had spent most of the 70s living in San Francisco. All of her friends lived in the Castro. So I think it was either really arrogant or really stupid to have a kid at that time. Mm. But she wasn't really paying attention to the world, which I'm not sure how that's possible. Mm. But that was the world I was born into. Those were the people that I was born into. As a kid, I had an Aunt Gary who was not related to us in any way, but he and Mom thought that was the cutest thing for us to call him. So there was Aunt Gary. And so I was raised in this suburban town that was very conservative, Red Pocket, Northern California, but with all of these fabulous people around me. So my teacher for elementary school was one of my mom's best friend, and she was a lesbian, and we didn't catch on to that because we were kids. It was just she had this roommate that was really fun. But I was always surrounded by queer people in a lot of ways, so I didn't realize that it was abnormal. Wow. Until, of course, I came out, and then it was quite abnormal.
Wait, so... Well, I love this idea of like it wasn't. It really isn't abnormal, but I guess the idea is when you leave that little cloister, you kind of have to adjust because people would be like Aunt Gary, right?
Yes, and then I'd be like defending him as a 7th grader, you don't have the language to do that when you're a kid, but you also kind of do. My nieces, they're older now, but when they were little, one of them was about 4. Mm-hmm. And she said she wanted to be just like my wife and I when she grew up. She and her best friend were going to get an apartment, and they were going to ride ATVs. That was their goal. And so her mom was like, "No, they're not just roommates. They're more than that, kiddo." And she's like, "No, Mom, I know. They're lesbians."
Oh, I love that.
The most adorable thing ever. Yes. So kids have that language. They just don't. They don't have all of the toxicity that we put on language, which is kind of lovely when you think about it. Yeah.
I mean, it's that whole, like, hate is learned.
Exactly.
Thing. Yeah. Well, we won't get into a tirade about what's going on in the world right now because it's just us rolling our eyes. There's a really great, you've seen 30 Rock, right? Tina Fey. Oh,
I know.
But there's a great joke where Tina Fey's character, Liz Lemon, talks about like, doctor said if I roll my eyes into the back of my head one more time, they'll stay like that permanently.
Welcome to 2017.
Yeah, that's just 2017 in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So okay, so we'll jump back to you accidentally ended up at UCLA in your 20s. So you came down with your wife, who is lovely. Although we weren't when we were at UCLA, it was kind of in that period of Prop 8 stuff. That bull.
Yeah, it was post 2008, but I think Prop 8 was moving through the courts at that point.
Yeah.
And all of our straight friends were getting married so that they could have cheaper tuition. And I was so mad at all of them.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, because like we didn't have access to it. So why would we know it was a thing?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was just like happy to be able to afford a coffee bean. You know, when you get your student check, I'd be like, woo!
Riding high.
I guess I want to maybe get back into what kind of books were you reading then when you were younger? You said you had to put a bunch of lesbian. Which ones kind of still stick to you today?
There's a series that was the first book I bought, the first lesfic book, from Radcliffe, who is now my publisher. Mm. So this woman was my hero, still is my hero, but don't tell her that. And
we'll make sure to tell her to turn off the podcast when she's listening to this part.
I'm fairly certain she doesn't know how podcasts work, so no one tell her.
Most people don't, and the technology's been around for probably 15 years.
Exactly. But Rad started this publishing company, and so it was so weird to go to these events where I had finally signed on, and there's this woman who's been my idol and for years, and I could see her in real life, and she would ruffle my hair, which I didn't let anyone do, but I let her, and she became this real life hero, if you will. Mm-hmm. And it was so odd because you've named your podcast Never Meet Your Heroes. Mm-hmm. And I did meet her when I was like 24. And then I had to reevaluate like what my goals were, because it was okay, sign on to write a novel, meet your hero, done. And there was nowhere to go really from there. Mm. But then my publisher also, we're one of the largest queer publishers in the world. And we're incestuous as hell. It's disgusting. So one of my friends who is...
Not to be confused with Alabama incestuous, though.
No. It's a much sexier incest. So I have this friend who's an editor, and she and her wife live in the middle of nowhere in Texas. And they're these sweet old ladies. Don't tell them I said they were old. And they want me to be their pool boy. This has been our running joke for years. Nice. They want to get me some gold lame shorts, and I'll be their pool boy. So Shelley Thrasher, the editor, started writing a novel, and she wanted me to read it. And I gave her some feedback on it, which I thought was pretty good. And she thought it was pretty good too. So she said I should become an editor. Mm. And that was a very new idea to me. And so I said, okay, I'll think about that. And she's like, okay, I'll talk to Rad and let her know that I think you should be an editor in 3 months when I'm going to see her. So I get an email from her the next week. She's like, yeah, I couldn't wait. I talked to Rad. You're going to be an editor. You're helping me on this next book. And I was like, what is happening? So I gained a new goal there, and I now have 5 authors assigned to me.
Nice.
And it's a very different way to approach literature. Uh-huh. Because you have to put on different hats depending on what you're doing. Uh-huh. And it makes you reevaluate the way that you write your own novels, because you know what it looks like from the other side, and you're aware of all of these things that you weren't aware of before, and that you kind of don't want to be aware of when you're writing, but it's impossible. So that's where I'm at. That's what I'm doing.
Do you feel, you kind of mentioned that editing helps your writing. Does it help you see mistakes that you don't want to make, or kind of just want to make the editor's life easier because that's kind of your job now?
Yeah, and that stuff happens naturally. Once you've been writing for a while, you learn grammar, even if you've avoided learning grammar your entire life.
Yeah.
But you become aware of the way that certain audiences react to certain things. Lesfic is notoriously biphobic. And so now it's weird. So if I have an author who's going to be writing a bi character, or if I am, then I always say mention it up front. Because lesfic authors are fine as long as they know going in.
Interesting.
It's very odd.
This is why I have fun talking to different sets of LGBTQIA. You know, like to see that there's these little segments that people want to stay in. I mean, we already kind of know after the 2016 election that people have bubbles now, and they don't want to. You know, no one wants to pop their bubbles.
No.
So, okay, so lesfic doesn't write to read. Well, is it because lesfic is kind of moves towards erotica and it kind of ruins their buzz? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
But even in the strictly romance field, there's a woman, Melissa Braden. I call her my publishing twin because she and I signed on at the same time. And our first couple books came out at the same time. And she's an amazing author. She can write romantic comedy in ways that are not boring. And we've seen so much from that genre, but the way that this woman does it, she sidesteps all of the tropes and all of that. She's awesome.
Awesome.
Also happens to be a friend of mine, but whatever. And and she had a review posted on Amazon a couple weeks ago from someone saying, this book was amazing. I loved it so much. It was so well written until I found out the author was bi, and now I hate it forever.
Whoa.
And it's so wild because she writes bi characters, which is nice to see in lesfic, but she doesn't do it all that often. So just the fact that the author was bi was enough to turn off this reader. And it's so weirdly bigoted. And you'd think in our community you wouldn't see that sort of backlash in 2017. And yet it's so pervasive.
Yeah.
I can't help hating.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy. You just kind of anonymously put it there. I find like, you know, like you and I are doing like a face-to-face FaceTime. And I was probably say that 5 times fast. But I feel like there's a lot of things that you wouldn't say to someone's face that you say very blatantly to, you know, online. And I feel like that's emboldened people. I feel like in real life now, I notice people are more emboldened with their opinions than they would have been in the past. Where you're like, I can Google that right now and it's not true.
Like, here's proof right in front of you.
Yeah, but I guess we get along because we're both kind of assholes like that. We're like, yeah, look, this is on my phone right here, and it says that that's not true.
Also, you're an idiot.
Yeah, I feel like that's implied.
Yeah, but you and I have always been that way, and I think a lot of people are becoming that way. But, you know, without our charm and good looks.
Yeah. It's tough being us. It's tough falling into so many special moments, right? You're like, I didn't even try to apply to UCLA. No, I'm just kidding.
I just ended up there.
I didn't try to get published, but like they wanted me.
It's wild, man.
So, well, I guess that's another interesting thing to talk about is like, do you read your reviews? Because I saw like you have stuff on Goodreads and there's stuff obviously on Amazon. And where else are people buying books these days?
My publisher's website.
Okay.
Definitely. But Amazon's taken over everything.
Interesting. Yeah.
So,
but they take so much off the top that it's kind of sad. Yeah.
It really is.
So one time I had my chapbook on there, and one time I got like a check for like 10 cents or something crazy like that. I mean, I don't do it for money, but it was just hilarious. It was like, why?
Like, why did you send me this check?
Why did you send this?
Did you want to compound my shame?
I think it's important to know how quantifiable your success is and to keep realistic expectations about who is or isn't connecting to your artwork. And keep that in mind. When
to be clear, no one.
Yeah.
No one is.
So when you're in a room with your nose up in the air, you should, hey, this is what's really happening. do you feel like you look at reviews? I mean, maybe the lesfic world is not as harsh as some other readers. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I do look at reviews. You can't not. Especially if you know that it's going to be a good one, then it's a nice ego boost.
Of course.
But also, I'm arrogant and an ass, and you know this. So if someone gives me a review that is negative, but they're pointing out things that they missed, then I'm able to really easily write it off. So with my first novel, someone said, well, this sounds like it was written by a teenager. Well, A, I was 19 when I started writing it, so I was.
Right.
And B, it was about skate and surf culture in California. It was supposed to sound that way.
Right.
So for them, it meant 2-star review. For me, it meant nailed it.
Yeah.
And
what little I know about some of your characters, they are typically kind of teenager mentality. So I feel like, yeah, she probably missed that. But even when I see
that's fine.
Even when if we went on right now and, I feel like the DC Wonder Woman movie was probably one of the best movies made this year. I'm sure we can find somebody who's got a 2-star review in a similar vein where they were like, she didn't have an invisible jet, 2 stars. Wow.
Yep.
We don't know if she had an invisible jet because it was invisible.
Yeah, it might have been there the whole time.
Well, let's talk about your books a little bit. So I have 2008, you wrote Dirty Sexy, which was the beginning of the Dirty trilogy. And then you wrote a few other books in between there. And recently, when did the recent book, The Price of Cash, come out?
November. So it just came out a couple of weeks ago.
Hot off the presses.
Yeah, and it's the second in a series. Oh. So the first is Cash Braddock. The second one is Price of Cash. And these novels, more than any others that I've done, I'm proud of. Excellent. I really am. I think I grew up, and it was a long time coming, and I think that you can see that, which is nice. It's nice to have evidence that I'm a grown-up.
Right. It's nice to, next time your mom calls you and says, when are you going to grow up? You're like, Mom, I just wrote a novel.
Here you go.
It's all right there.
Which, it's worth mentioning, my mother is my biggest fan.
Yay.
She orders a case of my books. Aww. She'll binge read. It's kind of adorable.
It is.
Yeah.
Does she have a little book club with her friends with your books, or is it that serious?
She keeps them on the shelf in her office, so anyone who comes to the house, they have to see her office and they have to see my books on display.
I kind of like this idea. I might steal your mom's idea and just have right at the front door an office. A desk and
Yes.
I mean, my
her
bookshelf.
Her partner built her office, so it's in the center of their house, and all the walls are glass. So you can't walk in without seeing everything on display, including
you're gonna have to send me pictures of that. That sounds amazing.
It's wild.
It sounds special.
It special is a good word.
Unique.
Yep.
Very unique. So, walk us through, Dirty Trilogy first, maybe, and then your Cash product, or what do you feel is the thing that if you're the most proud of Cash?
Can get dirty. Yeah, Cash has been fun. With the Dirties, I very much settled into the idea of an anti-hero. I write in first person, and so there's an intimacy in that. And the Dirties were about these kids who stole 30 million in gold bars and went on the lam and made a ton of very bad decisions. Obviously, they were not good decision makers. I suppose that's clear from the get-go.
I feel like the first problem was they were stealing gold bars.
Yeah, they're not very portable.
Yeah, they are not.
I had to do a lot of research. So that was... It was fun to go into that world where they've already made this terrible decision. And then at the end of the first book, the main character kills someone. And there's really no going back from that. Morally speaking, once you've crossed that line, you're kind of a bad person. So then where can you go with that character who's still supposed to be your narrator who's guiding this ride, and they're not a good person? And I would argue that that main character was actually a good person who just made some poor choices. But she ends up doing just about every bad thing you can think of, torturing people. She was a drug runner. She kidnapped someone, a child once, but for very good reason.
I'm learning so much about you.
That I'm twisted, yes. So I really enjoyed that sort of narrative, that sort of anti-hero. And so then with Cash, all bets were off because I knew I could do it. I knew I could sell a character who was, on the surface, evil, and when you dug a little deeper, wasn't. So Cash Braddock is a drug dealer. And the whole premise of the book is, well, I can't give away spoilers, but but it's her navigating that world, but finding her own morality. So in book 2, she realizes that she can't be a drug dealer because if she wants to be a halfway decent human, you can't sell drugs to kids. You know?
Yeah. Although it's good for business if you had to really... I mean, cigarette companies have been selling cigarettes, drugs to kids forever, so I feel...
And all you have to do that is overcome any moral compunction. And then you're good to go. That's a slight problem if you have any sense of morality. So Cash, very much in this book, digs into what is moral. Can you kill someone and still be a good person? Why do we not kill people? Why do we have laws? And why do we respect those laws? She has a relationship with a police officer in the second book, and she has to look at how he, and he's a Latino man, how he can be part of a police force that very much does not make room for him in society.
Right.
And yet he's enforcing those laws. So that was fun to take this white drug dealer who's a woman and have her as the morality police when she doesn't have a leg to stand on.
Right. Well, so often, I mean, I grew up in a church, and so often those people kind of decided to become born again because their past was so riddled with these moral problems that it was a way to kind of pretend that that didn't happen, that they understand morality, which is better. I feel like it's better for you to tell people, I've made these mistakes and I've learned from them, rather than having a moral high ground. But that's a whole other tangent. To make what you're talking about me for a second. No,
I love you. Let's do it.
No, but I wanted to get into a lofty idea about your character, about queer being an outsider. As a queer person, and then as a queer writer, you're able to look at these things and write about them in a questioning way, right? And my example was I was watching Female Trouble last night, John Waters' film. And
love it.
Which I watching it with my husband who's never seen it and my other good friend Michelle. And I was laughing. Like, I've seen it. This is probably my 4th time that I've seen it. And I just wanted to revisit it because I just wanted to... I don't know if I'm spoiling anything if I talk about cha-cha heels or the life of a heterosexual...
I think everyone except for your husband has seen Female Trouble.
Yeah. And, like, he was able to get into it, parts of it. But I thought it was interesting watching John Waters' film because it was at a time where, like, queer was kind of like anyone that wasn't heteronormative was queer, I felt. And I felt like this film was a home for those people. So the film kind of houses these aesthetics and these morals or ambiguity, right? Like Dawn Davenport is basically like this twisted... the beauty thing, right? When she gets acid on her face, I thought was like probably the best place to kind of connect back what you're saying, like this inversion of the beauty industry. So with you talking about the Latino male being, in the world of morality, that the queer is the outsider.
the idea that we have created a society that is white and heteronormative.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start making cracks in that facade, who are you letting in and who are you still keeping out?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in some ways, then the Latino male is allowed.
Right.
Especially if he's going to be a police officer, then he's an upstanding citizen.
Right.
But then you still want to keep the queers out. Or do we allow the queers in as long as they're white and gender presenting in the right ways?
Right.
But we keep out the Latino males because they are too far out of the aesthetic of heteronormativity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting the way that we draw those lines and where we draw those lines.
Right. Yeah, right now there's I think that the gay community is really rallying behind transgender community because they've
Mm-hmm.
become the next scapegoat for the moral high ground people, and also for gender nonconforming, because there's people still can't get on board with the fact that you could be this and it doesn't mean you're this.
Yeah.
To oversimplify it.
That these categories have existed all along, and
Right.
we just treat them like they're new.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about these days. I think that if they can push a world away so they can focus on something else, I don't
Yes. My students, I work at a high school.
Okay.
It's interesting. And
It's
I'm
interesting
the only,
that you're allowed to work around children.
I know, bite me. And for a lot of the kids, I'm the first out queer person they've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the first that looks like I do because I'm gender nonconforming.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids come into my office and they're freshmen, they're scared, they're shorter than I am, which is hard. And they see me and they start blushing and stammering and looking at the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so excited. But we have kind of this overarching question this year,
Mm-hmm.
and that is, are straight people okay? Because
That sounds dangerous. What does this mean? I might have to end this.
because they're so threatened, their identities are so fragile that the idea that gender is not binary can dismantle their entire worldview.
Yeah.
The idea that a boy can wear high heels and still be a boy dismantles their entire worldview.
Right.
Or that a boy might not be a boy even though you decided he is because he has a penis.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that these constructs are just so paper thin, they can fall apart at any second. So we ask, are straight people okay? Do they need our help?
Do they? I mean, I think even without that, in general, that's come up is, if you need help, you have to ask for help. And if you're really that confused by gay people, it's probably like Kim Davis needed to have a gay friend before she
really did.
Before she made that decision to break the law, which was her job. I understand her moral position. Like, I support, people having their beliefs, but when it's your job.
Not when it's your job.
When it's your job, you don't get that choice. You don't get to. If you were, when you work at a coffee shop, there's certain things that you're expected to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe we're
and you
just
don't get
too
to
hard.
pick and choose that or get a new job.
Yeah, get something that's She should have quit. Is probably
She really should have.
Maybe I can't make that judgment for her, but I feel like I would have just been like, nope, quitting.
Well, then assign a deputy. Do your job, but assign someone else to do the parts that I don't know.
Yeah, but that's
or
a good.
she's just an asshole.
I mean, maybe we're just picking on her, but she's a good example. Are straight people okay? Just to make sure I'm staying on that. I don't mind being tangential, but I just want to make sure we're not.
I'm good at distracting you.
So what came up about straight people are okay? Because one joke that I've read before is, ooh, masculinity so fragile. Like, I think that's also in the same framework there.
Well, the kids last year decided that the Associated Student Body kids decided that the homecoming royalty shouldn't have genders. And that was partially because one of the kids running it was best friends with a lesbian couple and wanted them to be able to win homecoming king and queen. And this
That's
year,
an example of good corruption.
Yeah, I love it. So it came back up this year, and all of a sudden parents in the community are like, my daughter's life will be ruined if she cannot be the homecoming queen.
What?
And it's like, well, she could still be voted homecoming queen. It's just, she'll have the choice of being called something else. And that blew the school apart.
Wow.
They just couldn't handle it. It's been fascinating to watch. And that's how we kicked off our school year.
I wish that you could report parents for that kind of, my daughter's life will be, whoa, back up.
Wow.
What is going on in your family? That this is the most important thing that she needs to do to be valued.
Yes. And how much worth have you put on that?
Right.
Because, wow, the world is going to be a tough place.
Oh, I know. Jeez. But I mean, everyone makes those kind of judgments about Trump's upbringing, the President Trump. Not my hashtag, not my president. But and I don't know. It's come up because I have a lot of friends with kids, and it's tough because you're responsible for certain things as a parent, but later on, an adult is responsible for themselves. And I guess the tangent here with that is, if that girl can't be homecoming queen, she's got to sort that out. That's an issue. That's its own issue. That has nothing to do with lesbians being homecoming queens.
No.
Or kings,
and
however they want to identify, right?
Exactly. And you're not going to follow them to college, hopefully. They're going to have to leave the nest at some point. So let's give them the tools to do that. Which is why I ask.
Yeah.
Are straight people okay?
What's another good example of straight people are okay? I like this.
Well, I mean, aside from the president.
Well, but it's a generational thing. I mean, like, my dad voted for Trump, and he's brown, and he's Mexican American. So I just have no hope there's no way I'm going to get through to that mentality.
Yeah.
So I kind of put Trump in the same place. Like, they're kind of just stuck there, and we have to endure. But
we do. And I was raised, obviously, by liberal people. But even they still fall into these assumptions. My mother would very much prefer that I look femme. And it's fascinating that my gender presentation can affect her in some negative way. So that would be an example of are straight people okay?
Yeah.
Your progeny is certainly a reflection of you to some extent, but you have more worth than just the children that you have made.
Right.
And
well,
I don't know.
That's becoming the new frontier, though, because women, their value was always based upon, and that kind of even hits back into the homecoming queen issue. Like, I'm a good mother to society if I do these things for my child, which at a certain point, I guess is trying to say is like, your child's an adult, and at that point, they're responsible for their success, and it doesn't. But mothers judge other mothers is what I've seen. And I think that's where that comes about.
My stepmother was homecoming queen.
Oh.
When she was in high school.
I'm sorry.
She also...
Sorry for your loss.
And she also worked at the high school that I currently work at. She was the principal for years when I went to school there. It's all very incestuous as well. It's very weird. And she never was threatened by my gender presentation as a high school student. And I was a pretty shitty kid. I stole things and I hit people, and I didn't go to class all that often. And when I did, I was drunk. And I was a delight.
You're a John Hughes hero.
Exactly. But she never, I don't think, put her identity on me. So it was like she was the homecoming queen. I didn't have to be. She went out and bought me the suit and tie to wear to homecoming with my girlfriend because I didn't want to wear a dress. And so I think that there's a very odd generational split, and we're kind of seeing how it plays out right now
Yeah.
with the parents that can let their children go and the ones that can't.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had an estranged relationship with my mom for about 10 years between her fundamentalism and I think, I mean, hi, Mom, but I think that some of it too was judgment from other moms. But
I know both of my mothers had other women tell them ways to make me not gay.
Oh, right.
And they ended those relationships.
Oh.
Which was
Awesome.
Huge for them. But I think that some moms can't do that. I know that your mom couldn't. It took her a while to figure out where that line was.
Yeah, she's so supportive now. She went to our wedding. Do you know what I mean?
Yay!
Like that's like a huge sorry to interrupt you.
No, I love it.
I'm hyper conscious of mansplaining nowadays, which I probably shouldn't because I'm a gay man and I probably don't do it. But
yeah, I'm sure, like, I mansplain because I wear pants, so it's automatic. Mm-hmm. So maybe you do. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, so you were saying about your mom had to cut off some friends, and that was probably huge for her.
Yeah, but then there were plenty of people that they should have cut out of their lives. They didn't. Mm-hmm. And so we can't really pick and choose like what decisions are good and bad. They kind of have to let our mothers make their own decisions. It's wild.
I know, isn't that crazy?
This new world.
When you flip over and you're like, wait a second, my parents might be imperfect, and I probably should question some of their life choices. Not in a negative way, but just kind of like, okay, Mom, like that's all right. I love you anyway. So it's kind of like the flipped, like,
yes, I may not always like you, but I will always love you.
Yeah, I mean, not always like your decisions, or not as bad as love the sinner, hate the sin.
Oh God,
it's not like that. I'm not trying to.
No.
Yeah, we're not going that's not what we're talking about. But it still fits the theme of like queer and questioning, like that you have the ability as an outsider to question these things, question homecoming queen, question why there needs to be non-binary. So there's any other gay babies at high school that you're really excited about that you're seeing there?
It's so wild to watch them. Like, a lot of them are coming out, obviously, because they're teenagers, and that's still a thing that we have to do.
Right.
And they're having multiple coming outs because a lot of them come out as far as their sexuality, and then they come out again with a different gender presentation. And then they come out 7 more times with a different gender presentation. And then once they have figured that out, they come out again with some sort of new conception of sexuality.
That's awesome.
And it's so awesome. But it's wild to watch the parents react, because some of them, when their kid comes out as queer, they're fine. They're like, okay, great, you're gay, let's do this.
Yeah.
But then the kid comes out as trans, and they're like, no, absolutely not. Or the kid comes out as gay and the parents are like, no, this is not happening. And then the kid comes out as genderqueer and the parents are like, they pronouns are a thing. And like, it's very confusing.
What pronoun do you prefer?
I use she pronouns, but I respond to all of them out of habit.
Okay.
Because I look like a teenage boy.
At one time, Justin Bieber was kind of an interesting for most lesbians, right? Because it was kind of like I think there was like a meme thing where it was like Justin Bieber, that was it. He's gone out of his way to make sure which part of the binary he belongs to. So we talked about a lot of the things that I try to touch on with this. And hopefully, if you're listening, you are touching yourself.
Not you, Mom.
Not you, Mom. Moms, they're just shaking. I could see them shaking their heads and rolling their eyes, like, oh.
They are. You too.
You too. With Cash Braddock, are you going to do the next book next year? No pressure, but it looks like you've been working on these pretty. One right after another, 2016, 2017.
When I pitched the idea, it was for one book, and it was 3 vague ideas that would follow it. And they sent me a contract for all 4 books.
Nice.
Which was panic-inducing. So I'll definitely have one out next November and the following November.
They probably just knew that you would do it. Like,
yeah.
I like the way they think. Um, who are you reading, or what are you watching, or what's inspiring you these days?
If I'm being honest, I'm watching Ally McBeal right now,
Oh,
and which I haven't watched in years, and it's so fascinating to watch 90s politics now
yeah.
because the show is like so transphobic and so homophobic, but with such good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's interesting. But
It's
then
like when
they're also
grandma's being racist.
it's like,
Oh,
oh,
grandma.
grandma. But then, like, they're asking these really important questions about gender and sexuality and what constitutes sexual harassment. And so that's fascinating. I feel like I don't have time to read anymore because I'm constantly editing and writing and beta reading. So this summer, when I was off of school, I just chose a series about vampires, and it wasn't gay, and I just read it, and it was so exciting to like not have to think.
Yeah.
So that's Kim Harrison, and that series wrapped up a couple years ago. But it's fascinating because there's like 15 books in the series, but she actually knew what she was doing at the beginning, and it's so rare to see that people plotting out an entire series world building in that way. I mean, I'm afraid of world building, so I'll probably never write sci-fi or anything like that, but I like when other people can do it.
Lots of research, right?
Yes.
J.R.R. Tolkien's probably not, I mean, he's not sci-fi, but I feel like sci-fi and fantasy belong in a similar pool.
They do.
World building, like to the point where the reader knows more about your world than you do. Is what I always hear about these different things. I kind of feel like it's worth bringing up to you the sexual harassment stuff that's happening right now. What's your opinion about what's going on? Why are men suddenly shocked that women have been sexually harassed? That's the most fascinating part. Straight people, are you okay? Do you realize?
Are you guys okay?
Are you okay?
Oh, it's so weird because I'm immune to so much of it, so I feel like I'm watching it from the outside. I'm granted so much masculine privilege because my gender presentation gives me that. So the sexual harassment that I have witnessed, it's the same way where I'm just on the outside looking in. But also I don't necessarily succumb to all of the douchebaggery that men do in sexually harassing people. But I love it. I love watching men's worlds just crash down around them.
I just lost any straight listener. They're like, nope. Just kidding. No,
and I'm out. But it's kind of beautiful to watch it happen.
Well, I think that there's that, at the beginning of the year, there's definitely a lot of that hashtag burn it down. And I think that there's an element. My favorite critique right now, I watch a lot of international news because American news is very
crap.
I don't know what's going on, America. I've been watching French or German news or British news because they have less bias. And their assessment, because I feel like France has been a little better. There's like a hashtag that says the translation is squeal on your pig. And so that's been the thing right now. And their assessment of what's happening here in America is that because the Trump thing last year with grab 'em by the pussy happened and no one did anything, that slowly women have felt more empowered to talk about these things. And in some way,
they're pissed.
Yeah.
Like, if a man can be elected president of the United States after saying something like that, then we can't see the threshold anymore. We passed it a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I think that it's time.
Right.
It's time to acknowledge, because if we don't, this is where we land.
Yeah. It was kind of scary, too, because I think it was a panel that was talking about it. They have a really great program on French 24 where they talk about women's issues. And I remember one of the women who was kind of older, and that's why I say it's generational, where the younger girl, like she was probably like in her 20s, and she's very optimistic. She's like, we're going to start changing the system. We're creating systems where women are talking about these things. We're asking men to stand up, and if they see a man acting that way, and like the older woman's like, that's not going to change. It's not going to change. And it's like listening to someone in a bad relationship who's been abused her whole life, and it's like, well, maybe it wasn't at a time, but now I feel like men are woke. As straight men are as woke as they can be on the subject for now.
And I think there's some validity in that, like thinking that it's not going to change, because she was once a 20-year-old saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
We're going to change the world. And then it didn't. But we also need that youthful optimism that we can. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have that, we're not going to.
Yeah.
Every movement sees that.
I think the optimism now is that there is a lot more women that are employed in places of power, mm-hmm. that are more organized with social media. That the when they said last year that, you know, with Trump, it was just locker room talk. And they fired Billy Bush. So apparently someone thought it was wrong enough to make someone lose his, and someone from the Bush family of all people, they fired. So that clout didn't save him. But another thing, as we get to the end, that I saw recently was Rosie O'Donnell was on the Watch What's Happening Live, and I forget, Andy Cohen was interviewing her, and Joy Behar, and he asked it. You could look it up on YouTube. It's a really great little soundbite. But Rosie O'Donnell was harassed. This is another good example. Harassed by Donald Trump for a decade. Yeah. And it was interesting how Andy Cohen kind of dismissed, not in a negative way, not in a our straight people okay way, but still kind of was like, you know, how did it feel to watch the president of the United States, somebody who'd harassed you? And she kind of was just like, it's a special PTSD to watch that. Yeah. Like, and I feel like that's a good peek into like how horrifying that it was okay. We have a track record of somebody who, a man, let's take away the whole idea, but to fit into sexual harassment, the horrible things that he said to her and treated her like, I don't understand it. And
it's been such an institution. He's really just an example of that institution.
Exactly.
And you mentioned social media as this sort of communication device that women never had before. Mm-hmm. And broad generalization of women, but we'll use it. But it reminds me of the way that Audre Lorde talks about language and the master's tools. And it's like we've been given this new tool and this new form of language that can't be regulated in the same ways. And it still is. Twitter still regulates language, and they kick off certain types of people and not other types. But we have this avenue that didn't exist before. And at some point we do have to use the master's tools. Audre Lorde was almost all the way right. Mm-hmm. But we have these new forms of communication, and I think that is so integral in changing the way that we approach power structures and hierarchical figureheads like Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And we can dismantle them in entirely new ways because of that.
Right, which I think is what the fear is for the other side. That's are straight people okay?
Are straight people okay?
You can let us know and we'll help you. We'll hold your hand.
Just like blink twice, guys.
And if we hold your hand, it doesn't mean we want to have sex with you.
No, we don't. Like, you're not that good looking, straight people.
I have standards. I just want everyone to know that.
Yep. I like queer people.
Right.
Straight people make me uncomfortable.
Well, I guess it's a good place to stop, especially because we got to Audre Lorde.
Yes. We've peaked.
We've peaked. It's all downhill from here. Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Hi to your mom again. Hi.
Hi, Anthony's mom, too.
So where can everybody find you online?
I'm on Twitter, Facebook. Twitter is Ash Bartlett. My publisher's website also has links to everything, so that's boldstrokesbooks.com. And if you just search my name, I pop up.
Awesome. So yeah, you can Google Ashley Bartlett, and you'll see all her books and her Goodreads and her reviews. Mm-hmm. I might troll you and write a bad review and see if you can find it someday.
Do it. I dare you.
I feel like that'd be a fun game to play with writers, right?
Which review did I write?
This writer wears too many hoodies. I can read it in her fiction. One star. It's like he knows me. 1 star. Sad.
# fake news.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks for listening to Never Meet Your Heroes podcast. Find us at nevermeetyourheroespodcast.com, where you can post comments, ask questions, and interact with artists and listeners. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe.